Good morning. It is 10 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get this started. I started the recording, so we have that available for those who aren't able to attend today. This is the April webinar. We're going to look at coalition building, and this will be the first of a two-part series. The May webinar will build on the topics of today and then also open some other ideas. So if people didn't attend this one, they won't necessarily not be able to attend in May. Obviously, it'll be available on the recording, but then a few items will be built off of. But if you have a coalition and you have the basics, May would be another opportunity to join in on that. So without further actually, I'm going to lie. I'm going to have further information because there was a handout attached to your calendar invite. So I'm not sure if you saw that. That went out yesterday, day before. I can't remember. Days are running together. But you're able to either print that off or it's a Word document, so you can just fill it out online. This webinar is designed to be a little bit more interactive, I think, than the other ones that we've had. So there is some participation with that worksheet. And then obviously, like Heather said, feel free to come off and mute and add to the discussion when we get to those points. So now, without further ado, I will turn it over to Heather Austin from Tobacco Free North Dakota.
Thank you, Abby, and thank you to our friends at the Department of Health for helping us facilitate these webinars and letting us host on their system. And Abby does lots of background work for us, so we really appreciate you taking the registrations, getting the handouts out, and helping facilitate event days. So thanks, Abby, and our friends at the DOH. Couldn't do it without you. As Abby mentioned, today is going to be a slightly different format than the last several webinars. We've always had some open discussion and collaboration moments, but today I'm hoping will be even more interactive. And I'm sorry, but I want to put you to work. And so I really hope that you take to heart some of the time that we give during this session to really make yourself some good notes, to utilize that worksheet that we sent out, and to help kind of gather some thoughts around what it means, to do coalition work. And it is work. It can be very fun and rewarding, but at the same time, it's also an investment of time, talent, and resources. So I am aware of that. And know that what I'm asking isn't always easy, even if it seems simple. So that all said, I'm going to go ahead and share screen and pull up my PowerPoint, and we will get this show on the road. Okay, so do we have everyone noticing my screen? Abby, can you give a head nod?
Yes, the screen is up.
Wonderful. Okay. So today's objectives, we're going to understand a little bit about coalition basics, essentially, and I'm hoping to have some time where we get to learn from each other. And I know just kind of having quickly reviewed the roster of people attending this morning, I know that there is some good experience with us today. I know some of you already have fully functioning coalitions. Some of you don't have anything at work in your community. And so I'm hoping that we can have some dialogue back and forth and help each other. We are going to spend time creating a plan, and then we're going to talk about how to put some of those plans into action right away. And then I'll give a little bit more of a preview on what the May session will look like. And if you want to mark your calendars right now, if you haven't already, it's May 19th. It's a Thursday as usual. It's the same time frame from 10 to noon. And we'll really kind of dive deeper into, now that we're spending all this time in April building a coalition, in May, what do we do with them? And so that's kind of where the thought process is heading for what we hope to accomplish with this two-part series. So that being all said, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about who I am and we are. In case you are brand new and haven't attended any of our webinars yet, I am Heather Austin. I'm the Executive Director for Tobacco Free North Dakota. We are a statewide nonprofit that I answer to a 7-member board of directors who are located all across the state. They include a wide variety of backgrounds and expertise, and I do have a staff person, Andrew Horn, that is on our team with me, and he is our coalition program director, and so you'll be hearing from him more and more as we go throughout this process as well. Andrew brings a unique perspective to our team in that he used to be a news anchor or a news reporter, excuse me, at KFYR TV. And so he has an interesting perspective in working with people and community. And so we'll have him sharing more information as we go throughout the next several months as well. But that's kind of who we are, and what we do is focus mainly on educating and advocating all across the state for tobacco prevention policies. And our goal is to improve and protect the public health of all North Dakotans by reducing the serious health and economic consequences of tobacco use. This does remain our state's #1 cause of preventable disease and death. And so what we do is vitally important in our opinion, because it literally helps save lives and save money at the same time for our state and our citizens. So what is a coalition? Why are we talking about this today? And how can we better understand how to put one together? So at its simplest, a coalition is simply a group of people and or organizations working together to achieve a common purpose or goal. They have something that they are coming together to discuss or to work on or to provide solutions for within a group, organization, a community. There's all different kinds of subsets. A coalition is also a collaboration of relationships, leveraging each other's strengths to push an issue forward. So what the members of the coalition bring to the table can sometimes color how they function or how the issue is discussed or even looked at. And then a coalition also brings interested or maybe vested parties, people who have some skin in the game or something to gain or lose. They bring these parties together to expand reach of networks and reach other advocates. So a coalition can be about growing connections and bringing more people together around an issue or to a table to discuss something that affects them, or maybe that affects, where they live, work, or play. And so coalition can have some pretty broad definitions. And I say all this because while it can be defined fairly simply, it's just a group of people coming together to work on something that they have in common, it can also have a lot of nuance to it. And I don't want that to dissuade you from attempting to put one together, because even if it can sometimes be hard work, it doesn't have to be overly so, if that makes sense. And so I just want us to keep that kind of in the back of our mind, that really at the end of the day, a coalition is just some people coming together to work on a project or an issue. And it can be as simple as that, even if sometimes we make it a little harder on ourselves with how we go about these things. Oops, there we go. Sorry, back up. Oh no. Having some technical difficulties here. Sorry, friends. Here we go. Yes. All right, so why do I want a coalition? Having all that said about what a coalition is, why do I want one? Well, there's strength in numbers. Many hands make light work. There are more voices can have a louder effect. It can foster agreement, compromise. It creates a unified, cohesive ask or directive. So the numbers is one of the more important factors of a coalition, although there are many small and mighty ones out there. So don't let that put you off either. One of the main reasons people come together in coalition is because it combines resources. Not everyone has all things. You can't be all things to all people all the time, is one of the sayings out there. But coalitions can help you get closer to that, because they bring together different expertises, different backgrounds, different perspectives, different resources, different talents. It can combine, monetary resources and funding. It can combine skill sets, all of those types of things, so that no one person has to do it all. And then coalitions can generate a lot of excitement and passion, and that's what typically leads to action. When you're doing this type of work out there, people's energy can feed off each other and generate ideas that you would never come up with on your own. And so bringing more people around a table, even if sometimes it can be contentious or, difficult to have certain conversations, at the end, it generally will lead to more excitement and passion for whatever consensus is come to. So that's why we work on coalition and why we do a lot of our policy efforts through coalition. So that being all said, here's where I'm going to ask you to step out of your comfort zones a little bit. And I would love for you all to indulge me and turn your cameras on if you are comfortable, so that we can have just a little bit of discussion around your current experiences with Coalition. You can see on the screen kind of a list of questions that I'm hoping will be kind of thought-inducing, and that you can share a little bit about what your current experience is, so that we can learn from each other and see where we need to go. So that being all said, I'm going to have you share your faces if you're willing. And if you're not, that's okay. But I'd love for you to share your faces for a moment, and then I'll put my questions back up on the screen. Anyone willing to come on screen with me? There you are. Coalition is about people. Coalition's about relationships. Seeing each other is an important piece of it. And I know we get really used to webinars where we don't have to do that. So I appreciate anyone who's willing to indulge me on this. All right, I would love to know, has anyone been a part of a coalition, a tobacco one or otherwise? There are many, many different groups around advocacy out there. There are volunteer groups. There are boards of directors that people tend to serve on. Is anyone willing to share if they have been a part of one? I see a hand raised. Go ahead, Sue.
Sure, I'm part of the Bismarck Tobacco Free Coalition, and it's been around for many years. And I have seen it evolve with different people coming in for different ordinances that we're trying to pass. So to me, it's always evolving every session, every policy thing we make.
That's an excellent point to make. Sometimes a coalition's purpose can change, or its focus can adapt to whatever the needs are. For those of you not wanting to go on camera or not able to speak, you can put things in the comments as well. Don't forget, we have a comment section that you can add to the chat. Anyone else willing to share if you've been a part of the coalition, if you have volunteered with any organization?
This is Jordan from Wells County District Health. Caitlin's here with me. She just doesn't get to be on camera. And we have a coalition called Wells County Community Cares Coalition, and it's kind of our blanket coalition that we use for all grants. It's made up of us. We have someone from the ministerial association on it, nurses that are retired, school teachers that are retired, and current school teachers. We have a peer support recovery person on there, mental health professionals, and I can't say that we've done like a whole lot with tobacco, but we've done a lot with like mental health and suicide prevention, and just hosting events or doing different messaging in our community. And anyone's like really welcome to join. We extend like the monthly meeting to all the school administration, just a bunch of different people. And if they can come, great. And if not, we have like our core group of about 10 individuals that are consistently dedicated to the coalition and show up and come up with ideas. We do fundraising opportunities to kind of increase our amount of money that we have that can put towards different efforts that grant money can't go towards. So it's a pretty like well-established coalition. And, you know, obviously like with this new grant for fiscal year 2023, like it's my hope that we can do a little bit more with like the smoke-free air law and incorporating some of that into our coalition work too.
Thank you for sharing, Jordan. I love how inclusive that group sounds, and I love that you're not relying on having to form your own coalition. You can join an existing one and be a part of it if you all have something that links you together. And it sounds like this is a more like health-based coalition with many different aspects of health relating to it. And so I love that that's kind of an out-of-the-box way of thinking of having a coalition without having to start from scratch or make your own. So that's really cool.
This is Steph Welsh from Cavalier County. We had a tobacco-specific coalition in the way back, before I was even in public health, and I've been here 13 years. And that kind of shifted to more of that kind of coalition that Jordan's describing to be a totally health-based coalition. And over time has evolved. We even have a behavioral and mental health task force. That tobacco, you know, all those different substance and behavioral health issues are kind of rolled into. And it's interesting over time, because I've been here for a while, just to watch the evolution of that coalition. I think before I was here, it really was like we started out cold calling people and saying, hey, are you interested in this? Should we do something? But it really is broad based. We have high school kids, we have healthcare providers, we have health and human providers, we have business and those kind of partnerships in that coalition. And over time, for example, when smoke-free law was really a huge pressing issue, our coalition was very in-person active because everybody was really passionate about seeing that happen. And then when we achieve those goals, we kind of go in cycles where we're a little less in person and more of maybe an email and virtual coalition, but it still works. And then we have this huge email listserv that we can reach out to in times of need, or if we have pressing things to communicate or want to reach out to find if people are interested in being involved. And that seems to work really well for us, that up and down flux that you can kind of ramp up or down as you need to.
Thanks for sharing, Steph. And that is common with a lot of coalition work and a lot of group work where there's an ebb and flow to things as things are happening or important or they're seasonal. So I think that's really good to be aware of. And I love that you talked about the evolution and how that changed to be even more inclusive because so many of those entities have commonality in tobacco prevention issues. And then our issues sometimes tie into those others, like you're talking about, you know, the substance use and dependence and mental health and behavioral health. And so I think that's awesome too. Are there other examples out there, other people that want to share? I'm going to pull the list of questions back up for a moment so that we can be reminded. Oops.
Heather, this is Preston in Fargo. We had the Smoke-Free Air for Everyone Coalition.
The SAFE Coalition, yeah, you guys have a good one.
But that's now going to be rebranded just before, because since that law passed, you know, so Anna Bell and I will be heading that up this fiscal year.
Awesome. And I think that it's perfect timing too, even if it is rebranded, smoke-free air will still be of high importance because of what we know is happening each and every legislative session, it seems, with those cigar bar bill attempts. So that's good to know that it's going to stick around even under a rebranding. So for those of you that have coalitions or that are involved coalitions, some of this has already been touched on a little bit, but can you maybe share a tiny bit about how you invited people to participate? Or maybe if you have a big success story or maybe a big misstep that occurred while you were volunteering, because I think it's important to know about how everything can be a little bit different from coalition to coalition.
This is Sharon Laxton from Walsh County, and sorry, I have a little touch of laryngitis.
Oh no! I was really hoping that you'd chime in though, because I know you have a cool story on this.
Yeah, so our coalition began back in 2008, and I was part of a Go Red group, and we had worked together a couple years on projects, and we had a lot of pressure to develop a tobacco coalition, and so I was like, how am I going to do this? And so I asked the members of that Go Red group to, join my coalition. And they did. And so that's been 14 years. And so we do meet quarterly. I really encourage when people come to share what's going on at their organization so that it's really a networking thing. So, our WIC director will share new program guidelines. The local hospitals will share what they're doing in their community. So I try to make sure that, there's time allowed, for every meeting for them to also share and if they need assistance with something. So, so that has worked out really great for us. So
Sharon, I love that. First of all, I love that you hijacked another group.
yes.
I think that's awesome. And sometimes we don't think of that because we're afraid to ask. And so I love that you were bold enough to ask. I think that's fantastic. And I really love the networking aspect of your group. I think that is something that we could and should do more of, serving each other, so that it's not just all about us and our issue, but how we can also, use our voices to help other issues, whether they align with us or not. Sometimes I think having that networking aspect so that there's benefits to multiple people and multiple organizations is really cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
All right, anyone else before we move on? I'll let you all go off screen for a little while again too, if you want to turn cameras off. Okay, so the point of having talked through all this.
Heather, there is one more hand up.
Oh, fantastic. Please go. When I share screen, I can't see everybody's faces, so I apologize for that.
Not a problem. This is Sue from Bismarck Burley Public Health. And when we were working on the smoke-free ordinance, we had an attorney on our executive board, and it came to realization that this attorney worked for a law firm that represented the tobacco industry. So we had to ask them to leave, even though their intentions were good, but since the firm lobbied for a tobacco industry, we had to ask them to leave. And that's part of our bylaws. So there's some weird things that can happen.
Thank you for sharing that, Sue. What an interesting conundrum. And I think it is important as you come together and set these things up and create bylaws or join organizations to ask to see their bylaws if you're in a different group or a collaborative group, because that does happen and we forget that it can happen. And I think that was interesting to note. Were they upset about having to leave, or did they understand?
They understood. Yeah, they were good about it.
That's good. Yeah, we don't want to accidentally give all of our inside information to the opposition. Interesting story. Okay, I can't see any hands. I'll rely on you, Abby, to let me know if any pop up, okay? The point of all that and talking through some of those things is, if you've ever heard the saying, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. Well, if you've seen one coalition, you've seen one coalition. They're all different, and it's the same in the nonprofit world. If you've seen one nonprofit, you've seen one nonprofit, because everybody has a little bit of a different structure, a little bit different methods of getting to where they focus on an issue or a project. And so on this screen, you just see many different ways or things to think about as we start walking through some of the steps of considering what a coalition might look like for us, or for yourself, or for your community, or for your issue. They can all be a little bit different. There is no cookie cutter approach to this, I'm sorry to say, or maybe I'm happy to say, because it means that you can customize and really make it fit your time frame, your talents, your people that want to be involved, the amount of resources you're able to have participating. So you don't have to feel pressure that your coalition has to look a certain way or be set up in the same way as another communities or another organizations. It really can be as simple as we first started talking about at the beginning here. It really can be as simple as just bringing a group of people together to work on something. So don't get caught up down in the weeds with thinking your coalition has to be under a certain structure. So that being all said, we're going to take just a little bit of time and do some brainstorming this morning. And again, I want this to be interactive. You can come off, hiding and share your camera if you want to. You don't have to for this part. This might be a little bit more introspective than collaborative, although it certainly, we can ask questions, we can talk through things and ideas together. But I want you to pull out the worksheets that Abby sent. And if you don't have it handy, don't worry. I'm going to put everything on the screen as well. And so if you have a piece of paper and a pen, you're set. You don't have to have the worksheet. But we are going to talk through about forming a coalition. And for those of you that already have a coalition, this might generate some ideas on how to expand your existing coalition. For those of you that don't have a coalition, but maybe know of some groups in the community that might be willing to band together, or that you could join, where our issue would fit into theirs. This might help spur some of those types of thoughts too, and then you'd have something to bring to the table with you when you join them. And so we're just going to kind of walk through some of this and do some planning, and see where it kind of takes us for the next, half hour or so. So you've got built-in work time here, so you don't have to go do it all on your own time. This is built into the webinar today. So planning time, we are going to create a loose outline of look like to you. And so you're going to want to consider what type you might have. Is it issue based? Is it project based? Is it policy based? Is it organizational based? And we're going to define a mission for ourselves and suggest a structure. Now, none of this will be set in stone. This is all conjecture at this point, or if you have a coalition, this might already be on the books for you. You might know all these answers already and not have to think about them too much. If you are in a coalition and you don't know these answers, maybe it's a great time to quickly pull up the bylaws or hop on the website if you have one and see what the mission actually is. Sometimes we serve on things for so long that we kind of forget. And sometimes we can be surprised to go back and look and see, or in cases where they've been around forever, like Steph mentioned up in Walsh County, or Preston is talking about over in Fargo, they sometimes have an evolution happen where they are now different than what they started out as, and that's good to know as well. And so I want you to take a solid, 3 to 5 minutes here and just make some notes for yourself. And then we'll share out just a couple of these before we move on to the next set of questions. So 3 to 5 minutes, consider what a coalition might look like for you in your community, and consider what your mission might be. Some examples, TFND's mission is to improve and protect the economic and health outcomes for people in North Dakota by offering up, tobacco prevention policy and advocacy work. So maybe, it's similar to that for your coalition, or maybe it's issue based. In Fargo, it was solely around the smoke-free air law for a time. And now it needs to move beyond that because we have that law on the books. And so maybe it's an issue based coalition. So with that, I'm going to stop talking for a minute and let you make notes. I do have a timer that I'll be using so the day doesn't get away from us. So 3 to 5 minutes, and then we'll have a brief discussion. And if you have any questions during this time, you can feel free to put them into chat or raise your hand, and we'll answer that right away for you if it will help you with your work. And I realize now I didn't talk specifically about structure. What I mean by suggesting a structure, is it a standalone coalition? Is it a part of another more broad-based coalition? Do you have specific time constraints or timeframes that you need to follow? Is it seasonal in nature, I guess I'm trying to say? How often might it want to meet would be another part of the structure. Will it need funding or rely solely on volunteer? Those are things to consider when you're talking about structure. And again, if this stresses you out, don't worry. This is all idea generation right now. Nothing is set in stone. As you start actually working on this in your community, things could change, and that's okay. But at least we'll have something to start from and work from. So 90 seconds to go. As we are nearing the end of our 5 minutes, is there anyone that would like to share what they wrote down? Or does anyone have any questions on what they're writing down or what they want to be writing down?
I may be just listening, but for structure, what does that mean again?
So for structure, I think it would be important to think about, is your coalition going to be issue-based or policy-based? Will it be seasonal or have a certain time frame that it operates? Will it be a standalone coalition where it's, a tobacco-free coalition in your community, or will it be a part of a broader, maybe health-focused coalition of folks? I think that you can, talk about, how often that you would meet, if you are going to be a fundraising entity, or if you're just going to solely rely on volunteer hours and that type of thing. Those are all things you could consider when thinking about structure. None of those are musts, I guess you could say, but they're things to think about when you're talking about forming a coalition. Does anyone want to share what they wrote down? Just one or two people. And if not, I'm going to ask again in a little bit anyway. So you could share now and get it over with, or run the risk that I'll call on you in a few minutes. I think we have a gambling group, Abby. All right, let's move on to the next set of questions then. I'll ask again in a few minutes. So now let's envision who's going to be around this table with us, who's going to be a part of this coalition. And to me, this is sometimes the fun part of brainstorming. And so we'll take a little bit longer on this section, and I'll probably, chat in your ears a little bit more as you're writing, and try and give you some ideas, because this is where advocacy work really pays off. If you can get enough people from enough different backgrounds to really build a strong grassroots effort. So let's think about who will be at the table with us and who we want at the table with us. And sometimes those can be two really different things. So first off, let's start by making a list of people and organizations that might be interested in our issue or vested in our issue. Maybe they're not interested per se, but our issue will affect them. And for the purposes of just me talking, I'll use indoor smoke-free air law as an example, because we know that we'll probably have to defend that again. And I think it's at the top of everyone's mind, especially after the quarterly partners meeting where we got all that wonderful data back from PDA, and we kind of learned where our communities stand in terms of readiness and education. And so just looking from that perspective, make a list of people and organizations that might be interested in our issue, who might have skills or resources that would bring value to our group. And then who does our coalition bring value to? Who do we help? And I think this harkens back a little bit to Sharon's input about networking. You know, who do we add some value to with what we're doing, or who can we help collaboratively or otherwise if our group is existing? So I'll give you just a couple minutes to purge your brains of what's at the top of your mind, and then I'm going to start giving you ideas to dig down further. So you might need more than 2 or 3 spots per question. Just flip your paper over and take notes on the back if that's the case. Hopefully that's the case. I'll give you 2 minutes here, and then we'll start brain dumping.
I gave us a spot each on the worksheet.
Oh, you're fantastic, Abby. I love it. My PowerPoint slides are so small, I can only fit so much without having the words get tiny. I challenge you all to still flip your pages over, fill Abby's 6 spots, and keep going. Nancy just put a cool thing in the chat, and I bet we could probably Google and find this too. Nancy says there's a diagram of a target that they use for their coalition structure, and it has a core, an inner core, and an outer core, like a core, an inner ring, and an outer ring, I guess is how you could say it, so that you kind of expand out your network as you think about people. That's a good way to look at it. Thanks for sharing that, Nancy. So before I start spitfiring ideas at you all, is there anyone else that would like to share a thought process or an idea? Or maybe for some of you who have coalitions, would you want to share who is already a part of your coalition or who's already around your table and what either brought them to you, kind of like Sharon's Go Red for Women group, or what backgrounds they have that makes them interested in your coalition work? Does anyone want to share anything like that to spur some ideas for others?
Heather, this is Brady Chesterville.
Hey,
I
Brady.
just add we have not a great coalition. We've had a lot of trouble trying to get one started and trucking along much, but we started ours with doing surveys out to community members and businesses, law enforcement, religious organizations or churches, schools, all that kind of stuff to see interest and let them know kind of what we were doing. We've had very little response other than, you know, a couple good organizations, but that's our problem is ours tends to be organization focused with just reps from a few different places and not really like the go-getters or doers in the community. So, I mean, we're working and always trying to get a little bit better, but COVID threw a wrench into all of that, and we're going to be starting back up before long, but that's our hang up.
Thanks for sharing that, Brady. And I think that's some valid things to consider as we think about who gets invited and who's around the table and how we go about engaging them. I think it's awesome that you used a survey to not only find interested people, but to educate. I think that can serve a dual purpose too. And so for those of you, as you're out there talking to people and inviting them to participate, even if they're saying no, they're still learning something about you and your issue and maybe your organization. So that's an interesting way to look at it. And
But
I like,
we also used, though, we did the little bit education of what it's about, and ours was more wellness driven instead of one topic. But we tried to gain interest that way, but we also had time frames that worked for people, days of the week, time of the day, all sorts of stuff to try to narrow it down to what worked best for the largest group of people.
that's fantastic.
Didn't do too bad with it, but we still just have very poor attendance, poor interest. And so, I think somewhere along the line, we've probably done something wrong in trying to get the right people, but so you're always working at it.
Yeah, so maybe some of this process might help you get some new ideas or rejuvenate what you already have going so you can build off it and not have to start from scratch again. Thanks for sharing, Brady. Anyone else have any thoughts or ideas or stories to tell?
This is Deb, and I was just going to say, we use our interagency group as our coalition, and we meet quarterly, and we found that works really well in our community because it's a small community. If I was to pull people in for a tobacco coalition, it'd probably be the same people. Each quarter I do a tobacco update, or as I see information that's needed, I'll shoot it out to our coalition. And by us all working together, and if we have something that we really need to focus on, it really helps to build that relationship over time and continuously. And by working with tobacco and then working with the schools, we can kind of work together and get our messages out. I found it really works well in our community.
That's awesome, Bev. I like that you participate and give updates even when there's not a project or issue going on, so that you have that continuity, like you said. And those quarterly meetings sound like they work pretty well for a number of coalitions, so that it's not too time intensive for people to want to join, but it still keeps them in the loop, and then it allows you to do like the action alert type status, your email update, because they know who you are and they know you're a part of the group, and it gives it a little more validity. That's really good feedback too.
I started writing each quarter, kind of doing a write-up each quarter so that they have something in writing instead of me just speaking, because it saves time, plus they can reference back to it.
That's awesome. Reports in writing, or updates in writing, or meeting minutes that are sent out after the fact on a regular basis, so that people who can't attend are still in the loop and can still be involved and help when they can. That could be part of the structure. For those of you that were asking more questions about structure, all of that could be a part of what you consider there. All right, so as we're making lists, does anyone want to share their current list? It might generate ideas for other people for their lists. Everybody's list could look a little bit different right now. Is there any like 2-3 people that would just quickly read off your list?
Morning, Heather.
Morning.
You're not going to see my face, but it's good to see yours.
That's okay.
Okay, so we had this is Bonnie from Stamp Coalition, and that was going pretty strong until COVID hit, of course, which I'm sure that happened to other people. And we were meeting monthly, the first Wednesday of the month. And at our strongest point, we had a lot of healthcare people, including the nurses from the college. We could probably get up to 20 nurses at a time. We would have the media, which was really good to have them there. We would get parents. I don't believe we've ever had any teachers there, but we've had the police department. We've had the Homeless Coalition. So we would get a real variety of people that would show up. And we did the same thing. We would get minutes and send them off. So, but right now we haven't even started up again. You know, we're going to kind of wait and see what happens. But I think it's really important that we even have that thought process going. So, but that's what we've done here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing, Bonnie. And you're right, Stamp Coalition has been awesome in the past. And so I'd love to see that get rocking and rolling again, because you guys really do good work, and you had some really passionate volunteers for a while there. Very cool. Anyone else? Yeah. Anyone else want to read off their list? Now that Bonnie kicked us off. All right, that tells me you might need more ideas for your lists, and I have a whole page of them right here. So going back to our list of people that we can invite to the table or people that might be interested, you've heard some of them from the people that have already spoken, Brady and Bonnie and some of the other folks already today, but just kind of getting your thoughts around sections of your community that you can consider that might have either a vested interest or just an interest in general. So you've already heard a little bit about the schools, so teachers and those types of people, parents. We heard about students. I mean, we have youth advocacy summits that happen, so there might be student groups already up and running and ready to do some sort of advocacy work in your community. But you could also consider school counselors, student resource officers, or the police department. That was mentioned already. Nurses, and she was talking about nursing students, but school nurses, nutritionists, coaches, sports teams coaches, other school coaches, because a lot of times their athletes are the ones getting caught vaping and getting suspended from games or off the team. The music teachers, musicians, lung health is really important in that regard. College students has been mentioned. Clubs would be another community aspect to think about. So we've already talked a lot about kind of piggybacking on to existing coalitions that are health focused, but maybe it's just a community focused organization that even if you can't join it or have it join your coalition, maybe you can partner on a project or maybe just educate each other, part of that networking aspect that Sharon was talking about. So clubs that might be up and running in your community might be a Rotary Club, a Kiwanis Club, Optimist Club. If there are any leadership groups, I know there's a group called Leadership Bismarck Mandan that's run out of the Chamber of Commerce. So maybe there's a leadership group in your community. And ours works on a community project every spring. And so sometimes they'll pick policy work and go in front of commissions and councils. There's downtowners groups, there's garden clubs. Sharon talked about the Go Red Club. That's an American Heart Association, Go Red for Women group. So maybe there are other groups like that put on events. Are there sports leagues in town? Here we've got the Bismarck Larks. Are there other community teams or softball leagues or other things like that might have an interest? Children's sports groups. Are you sitting in the stands week after week next to a group of parents watching kids play softball or soccer or things like that you can strike up a conversation with those people and see if they're interested? Same thing with church groups, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, summer camps. Are there connections there where these groups might work on community projects or summer projects that you could get them involved in talking about protecting our indoor smoke-free air law, talking about quitting vaping, things like that, depending on what your coalition is focusing on? Are there events either that your coalition could participate in and have a booth at, or events that might be interested in whatever issue it is you're talking about? I know the Minot State Fair has been doing tobacco-free work for a while, attempting to get the state fair to go tobacco-free, and I believe that they last were pitching have it be like a tobacco-free day if it can't be the whole entire event. But are there outdoor concert series or campgrounds or expos or other events happening in your community, art events, community art walks that could be labeled tobacco free and help you share your mission or your policy ask? Are there coffee groups in your town? I know for a while there were a few coffee clutches in our town where people get together on a weekly or biweekly basis and just talk about things happening in the community. The senior center might have a core group of volunteers that are ready and willing to do something and have something, you know, fun to work on. Veterans groups, we've had a lot of support from military and veterans in the past on some of our work, and maybe they just need to be re-asked again to participate. They were pretty integral in our ballot measure efforts back in 2016. What have they been working on since then? Maybe they're interested in joining us for another attempt at something. Are there moms groups or parent groups, MOPS, preschool groups? And then thinking about where you go in your community. Where do you interact or see people on a regular basis? Where do you shop? Where do you go to church? Where do you get your hair done? Do you go to the zoo a lot or community parks or things like that? You interact with people day in and day out. Is there anyone in those situations where you'd be comfortable enough to say, hey, I'm working on a really important community project and we're starting a coalition. Would it ever interest you to join us? Most of the time, people will join things if they've simply been asked. And most people never ever get asked to do anything. And so they never join anything. And so we need to be the ones that are doing the asking. And then if there are any up and running networking groups, things like that, again, you can go and share your story, even if you're not joining their group or coalition and they're not joining yours, at least you're sharing and educating members in the community. And that's kind of a neat side effect of all of this type of work. The more people you ask and tell about your mission and invite to join you, even as they maybe don't have time for it or aren't interested in that type of work or, you know, volunteering, you're still educating people in your community around the importance of your issue. And so at the end of the day, you're still moving the needle in terms of grassroots project work, because you have now more people educated to make a decision if those types of choices come in front of them again. So that's kind of my brainstorm for you. And I'll make sure that I get this list of ideas out to you so that you have it handy after the fact too, and you can continue to think through who you invite to your table. Having said all that, is there anyone that has any questions or want to share any comments or list ideas before we move on? I know this is all a lot of information very fast. This could be a whole like 2-day event if we wanted to work on starting coalition. We're doing it in 2 hours. Okay, we'll continue on. Feel free to always put questions in the chat or raise a hand if we need to backtrack at all. So now that we've talked about and thought about people, let's think about how we would ask those people to help the coalition. What would we ask them to do? What kind of things does the coalition need to be able to function? And this again can be very, very simple. I mean, there are coalitions out there that have, you know, big hierarchies and structures, and they follow Robert's Rules of Order religiously, and they almost operate the way an organization operates. You don't have to do that. Coalition can be very simple. Coalition can be very loosely structured and loosely based, but you do still want to have some general idea of how we ask people to participate. And so I think just thinking of 3 roles and maybe 1 responsibility, if that's appropriate. Maybe the role doesn't have a responsibility other than, you know, just attend and be there. And so when you think of roles, things that you could think about is if you're going to have, you know, a coalition leader or president or, you know, someone that's kind of in charge, so to speak, if there's someone that's going to kind of corral the group during meetings and lead them through meetings or walk you through an agenda if you have an agenda. It doesn't have to be that formal, but it can be. So maybe that's one role. Maybe you have somebody that is in charge, asked to fulfill the role of, you know, sharing, you know, the emails or the calendar invitations or the minutes after the fact. Is there someone that's kind of the communications person for your coalition that is interacting with the group at large so that not everybody is all the time? So it's kind of funneled through one role sometimes. Another role might be if you have fundraising to do, or if that's something you think your coalition would need, if it's not going to be strictly volunteer based, if you need someone that's in charge of finances, like a treasurer, or someone that would have access to the money to spend and collect the money that's being donated. And so you might need that role fulfilled. You might have where you have a recruiter or a membership person if you are charging for membership, or if it's all, just whoever can come can come. Sometimes you'll have an active person like that. So there's lots of different roles, I guess, is to make a long story short. And these are all, like I said, every coalition is a little bit different. Some of these roles are needed, some aren't. Some will evolve over time as your coalition starts functioning. You'll see what you need and what you don't need. You might start out with 3 or 4 key roles and decide only 2 of them are necessary, or you might need 7. But just think about that a little bit, what might be helpful as you first get started.
Sue has her hand up.
All right, Sue. Go ahead, Sue.
Sorry, I forgot to unmic. For our coalition, we always look for somebody that's willing to be the spokesperson if we have to do media or if they're going to be interviewed for an article.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then we look for, who knows who, are they willing to contact their legislator or their policymaker? But you're right about having that person that can send the email action alerts out to the coalition members. That's a key role to have too. And in the past, we've had somebody that had a marketing background that did our website for us.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Sue. And yeah, I like the idea of a spokesperson role, so that there's kind of a go-to person or a couple of people. Some of these roles can be more than one person, but just having that clear knowledge of who it would go to or who's going to help with that specific thing really can simplify and make life easier, so you're not on a constant scramble trying to find someone to do something. Does anyone else have any other thoughts to share like that or questions around that? Anyone want to read off their list? You guys are also shy about your lists.
Hey, Heather, this is Sarah at Willett County. I would just say somebody that's like the coordinator, gets the meetings going, emails the minutes, and then a person that takes the notes at the meeting so that the person that's coordinating the meeting and running the meeting isn't trying to listen and take the notes at the same time. And then I know up here in Willett County, when we meet monthly, we usually do kind of an activity or some type of little presentation. If it is on like self help skills or your own mental health. And we've done one on tobacco. We've done one on immunizations, just to kind of let everybody know, maybe a hot topic or something, and given a 10-minute presentation on that, but maybe an activity person that comes up with the activity or what the main focus on that month. So those would be some people I would have.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I think that's a good way to look at it too. And in fact, it reminds me, I have been an Optimist member in the past, and every month they have a different person in charge of who the speakers are for the month. The Optimists meet every single week, and so they need 4 speakers per month, and each month a different Optimist member would be in charge of filling up those slots, so that the group is always learning about other people and organizations. And I myself have been invited to present in front of them multiple times because of that. Different people that are in charge of the months will think of different things, and so I'll go and speak on different topics as needed. So that's something too. Anyone signing up for a role, it doesn't have to be this is your role forever and ever. It could be, will you fill this role for a month, or will you fill this role for a quarter, and then it goes to somebody else, and that gets more people involved and engaged too. Any other comments, questions, lists? Okay. Next step. So now that we have all these people and we have some roles fulfilled, what activities might we plan to engage the public or to interact with other advocates or groups or to educate our policymakers? So just kind of brain dump some activities, and I'll share some examples of some that we kind of use as tried and true activities in a few minutes. But before I do that, just see if you can write down a few things that, knowing your focus or mission, your structure, the people around your table, and how we're asking those people to participate, what types of things might we now have them all do together? So 3 activities or more. And these, again, are just examples. They aren't going to be set in stone. You're not committed to having to do all of these activities. But I think it's important to generate a list of things that we could do so that when the time comes to mobilize, we can cherry pick out what is either the most important or the easiest kind of low-hanging fruit, or something that might be the most effective. And include your target audience if you know it. Some activities might be more appropriate for the public versus policymakers, or other advocacy groups versus the public, and all of those types of nuance that you can think of. For those of you that have coalitions or have had coalitions, this might be easier for you to think about because you probably already have done some activities in the past, and they might bear repeating. They might be worth repeating again. So you could fill out your list with things you've already done that would be beneficial to do again if it's been a long enough time frame since they've happened.
Or to have ideas for others to use.
Yes, thank you, Abby. Another good way to look at it. Thanks, Becky from Custer Health. I see you have to sign off. Appreciate the participation.
So this is Sharon again, and some of the things that we have asked our coalition members to do over the years were things like gathering signatures for initiated measures, call to actions, and then recently to get them to see if anybody would be willing to complete those surveys that were sent out by PDA.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Sharon. I think that's kind of a neat way to look at it too. You don't have to create your own survey as a coalition, although you can, like what Brady was talking about. But if there are other community surveys happening, or other organizations doing survey work in your community, having your coalition help spread those surveys around and get people to answer them. Sometimes, again, it just takes a personal ask versus an email blast for us to pay attention to certain things. And that gets you a better response rate, which gives you more accurate community data. Anyone else have anything to share like that? That was really good. Right, I'll give you about 30 more seconds, and then we'll move on. In that time, does anyone want to share their activity list?
I think for us, like, we have a coalition Facebook page, and I think like when it comes time when like TFND or DOH like sends out those targeted social media kits or pre-made graphics, like instead of just like us putting it on our district health page, like also incorporating that onto like our coalition page, so it doesn't always just seem like it's coming from our standpoint, you know what I mean? Just more inundation with like sharing the same message and seeing that like another entity with various people are on board with the same idea. I don't know, just more
That's an
social
awesome
media.
idea. I love it. I love having maybe one of the roles is helping, manage a Facebook page for the coalition. And then, finding different posts to share. You don't always have to create your own content. Sharing content or using pre-made content makes it easy for someone to commit to something like that. You could have a team of moderators that help, so it's not all on one person too. I think that's an awesome idea, Jordan. Okay, well, here are a few more things to think about as you're thinking about activities to do. A big one for us at TFND is, of course, educating and informing decision makers. And this is a slide that has been in many of my presentations in the past. And we use it a lot because I think it's such a good one. I believe this is one that Jordan probably built for our youth presentation a long time ago, and we keep using it because it's so good. So thanks Jordan at Bismarck Burley for putting this together way back in the day. Anyway, I mean, thinking about some of your activities and some of the people around the table, who they might know that is a community decision maker at the local or state level, or maybe a more specific level like park board or school board, and how you can get information to them, whether it's by asking them to participate in an event that you're putting on, a one-on-one coffee meeting. A couple weeks ago at our quarterly partners meeting, there was a lot of talk about blueberry muffins. And so maybe it's, something simple like that. You can call them, write a letter, email. Face-to-face is always going to be probably the most effective because it's all about relationships when you're working in coalition work. But there's lots of different ways to interact and then get information to them. And so that could be one of the coalition's activities. It doesn't have to be a real formalized thing. It can be, brainstorming around the table. Who knows who? How do you connect to them? How do you know them? Do you know somebody else who knows them that you can help make you a connection, kind of warm the market, so to speak? So those are all activities or things that you can do together. You can, we've heard some talk about the media. I love that Stamp Coalition had media as a part of their coalition. And so maybe that's another key person that you can invite to your table is media groups or media people, because then they have kind of an inside scoop, so to speak. Not like Sue was talking about where the industry lobbyist has the inside scoop. This one would actually be beneficial, a media inside scoop. And so, having that is something to think about, or at the very least, maybe one of the roles in your coalition is someone that can help put together press releases and send out press releases when you do have something going on, or when an issue is in front of your community, or when you're working on a big event or project, so that there's somebody like Sue was talking about that's a spokesperson, but also somebody that reaches out to the media, so that you're both reactive and proactive with getting your education and message out. You can pre-record things, PSAs, radio commercials, things like that. Using social media, like what was just mentioned with a Facebook page, is awesome, but there are other ways you can interact online too. Instagram and Snapchat, YouTube, all of those are super popular with young people. Facebook is trending toward an older crowd, and so depending on what demographic you're hoping to reach, you might want to consider where you are at on social media, because if you're trying to get young people involved, you probably aren't going to find them as much on Facebook. If you're trying to work with maybe retirees or people that have a lot of time on their hands, that's exactly where you'll find them. And so kind of think about things when you're doing your social media work and your messaging. There are different demographics and audiences that you'll find on different platforms. letters to the editor are a great way to educate around a certain policy or a certain issue, or to make a call to action during legislative session. We typically will see more of these from our coalition and from our partners, because it's a way to get advertising out across the state without having to actually buy advertising space. And they're educational in nature. And so it gives us a little bit easier way to explain the whys of the issue and the ask that we're hoping to see. And so letters to the editors are usually pretty short. And then, depending on the market, there are different rules around how often you can do them and how they are picked up. So community and school activism. This is another slide that we show a lot to our youth, because they typically like to do more project hands-on activities. They're not as interested in managing a social media page or writing a letter to the editor, although they do that. But they love hands-on activities, and sometimes those are the most impactful ones because they create these great visuals that we can then show to our policymakers. And so again, hearkening back to that, who is around our table that we're interacting with, or who knows who in the community that we can reach out to. You might find that there are already service groups out there, both young and old, that are looking for projects. Maybe a requirement is that they do a community project. I know that's the case sometimes in scouting, sometimes in church groups, and different other organizations like that, where they have to perform some sort of community service or community project. And why not have it be through your coalition if you're willing to help manage whatever small amount of reporting or paperwork or proof that they might need on the back end of it. It can really generate some big visual moments for an issue in a community. And so that's another thing that you can consider for an activity. Plus, these ones tend to be the more fun ones, I think. So that all being said, where can we focus our energy? I'm going to talk about that next. But before I do that, are there any questions? I know that this is a lot of information. I know heads might be spinning at this point with ideas and concerns and anxieties. So are there any questions that I can answer before we move on and talking about focus? Yeah, I'm just seeing Bev's comment right now. So Bev says when she worked in Smoke Free Linton campaign, she had a community member who would reach out to individual organizations in the community to make arrangements to do presentations at each organization. He made arrangements with 17 different organizations. That is awesome, Bev. So if she's talking about kind of like what I just mentioned, where I went and presented to the Optimist Club, this person did that with 17 different organizations. That's fantastic. What a way to create a knowledge or a knowledgeable community. Excuse me, I'm losing my words all of a sudden. All right, any other questions or thoughts to share before we continue? All right, if not, I'm going to give just a few suggestions. Of course, your coalition can be customized to your community or to what you think it should be working on, or how it can best work within whatever confines it might have. If it's a part of another larger health-based organization, there might be different rules around how projects are decided or activities are decided. But I always talk about the three-legged stool. We know this. You guys, if any of you have seen me present before, I talk about this a lot. It's our CDC recommended best practice, evidence-based policies that we know work for tobacco prevention and control. It's a comprehensive program at fully funded levels if possible, but high funding levels if not. Our strong indoor smoke-free air law, which North Dakota has one of the best written laws in our nation. And then high tobacco taxes, which we know North Dakota has one of the worst tobacco taxes in the nation. And so if nothing else, these are always your tried and true fallbacks if you're looking for a mission or a policy to promote or things to educate on or around. These are the three legs of the stool that you can always fall back and know that educating and creating advocates for this type of work is always going to be a good thing, because it's always going to be needed. In our world anyway. having said all that, I feel like our strong indoor smoke-free air law is one of our key priorities for this upcoming legislative session. And so I guess my ask or my encouragement would be that however you form your coalition or whatever else that your coalition might be working on, that you incorporate this into it as well. As we know, our law has come under attack the past 2 legislative sessions now, both 2019 and 2021. We saw a bill that would have made an exemption for cigar bars. And we don't want that. When North Dakota voters passed our law 10 years ago now, 2012 was the ballot measure, every single county in North Dakota voted in favor of this law. It took effect December 6th, 2012, and it covers smoking and or vaping. So it covers things that can be combusted, aerosolized, vaporized. It covers tobacco and other substances. So vaping is included. If marijuana had passed during that ballot measure attempt, that would not have been able to be combusted or aerosolized indoors either. And this is any public space or any space that employs people, including the areas within 20 feet of the entrance, doors, windows, etc. And so it's a very comprehensive, well-written law. It was kind of at the forefront because a lot of states and other places had to kind of play catch up when vaping hit the market because their laws didn't account for that because they were written so long ago. So anyway, this is something we certainly want to protect. That all being said, it does not include ceremonial or traditional tobacco. To be clear, if there are spiritual or cultural ceremonies with tobacco in them, this law does not affect those. And so in 2019, the first cigar bar bill came up. It was not as close of a vote on record as we think it would have been otherwise because 7 years had not passed yet. And so they needed a 2/3 majority of legislators in order to change a ballot measure. And once they found that out, we think that some people switched their vote so it wouldn't be on record that they were in favor of cigar bars until they had an actual chance at passing it. And so that year, I think it failed like 33-17 or something to that effect. And so it wasn't all that close. But last time around, they brought the same bill back. This time the 7 years was over with. So they only needed a simple majority, 51%. It passed in the House by 3 votes and it failed in the Senate by only 1 vote. So it was super, super close. We fully anticipate seeing it come back again for 2023 legislative session. My fear is that they will take some of our key talking points and amend the bill just enough to be slightly more palatable. Maybe they'll have it be a standalone entity. Maybe they'll require ventilation systems, which we know don't filter out all the secondhand smoke. Maybe they'll tweak it just enough under the guise of being reasonable, but really it will still be just as dangerous as before. And so we know that we have to defend against that again. And so these are things that we're talking about right here. I mean, this is what we can do about it. We can form coalitions, we can work on projects and educate the community at large, and we can get involved in the legislative process. And all of these things are what we've been working on all morning, essentially. And so my hope is that as you go back into your organizations and into your communities after today, that you legitimately put some time and thought into calling even a handful of people together. Say you reach out to 5 people in the next 2 weeks, and if you have anyone at all say yes, ask that person to bring 1 friend. And then you have a coalition. I mean, it takes just a few people around the table to get started, and then you can utilize some of what we talked about today to grow from there and flesh out your purpose and your focus and make decisions on how simple or complicated you want it to be. And so that is our hope there. Some of the statistics that we can educate on and around too are the toll of tobacco in North Dakota, how it all ties together and why it is we do what we do. And so that's kind of my ask and my spiel. And knowing that, of course, your coalition can focus on other areas of tobacco prevention and control or other areas of health that might tie into what we do, but not be fully incorporating all of what we do. And that's okay too. I think any conversations that can happen again, even if it's not bringing people into coalition, it still is educating in a community and working toward that grassroots effort that we need come session time, so that you have many, many voices, at least understanding what it is on the table when it comes to rolling back our smoke-free law, or not having, electronic products classified as tobacco, or not having high taxes. And so those are all things that can be considered. So that being said, I would love to open the table one last time if anyone wants to share their camera and see each other's faces one last time before we log off. That is part of the people-person coalition that we know is most effective. And so we can have a little camaraderie before we log off today and talk through any final thoughts, questions, or things that I or Andrew or TFND could potentially help with as you work through these processes in the coming weeks. There's some faces coming up. You guys are the best. Thanks for indulging me. I know we've all gotten very used to not using cameras, myself included. Oh, you guys are awesome. Thank you. Any final thoughts or questions? Raise a hand, put them in the chat, shout them out. Whatever is most comfortable for you. Well, I would just like to say I learned a lot from you all this morning too. I loved those of you that were willing to share all the ideas that you helped generate. I love all the differences that we got to see in your coalitions. It really is true that if you've seen one coalition, you've seen one coalition. I think nobody had exactly the same setup or format or outcomes. So that was cool to hear a little bit more about. Going forward for the month of May, the next steps will be, my hope is that many of you will take this to heart and start forming a coalition, or at least bring together a small group of people that are interested in forming a coalition, even if it's not formed yet, or that you've rejuvenated something that's already existing or been in existence, or that you've collaborated with a group, or vowed to participate in something that's going on that might be relevant. Because next month in May, we're going to talk more fully about what your coalition can be working on and doing. So we'll really dive in more deeply to different activities and processes and things that you can put in place that will engage not just your coalition members, but your communities. And we'll probably focus more around TFND's legislative agenda and how your coalition can help with that. And so if you're looking for something to have your coalition to do or work on the month of May, the webinar will be for you. If you've already got a full agenda or full slate of projects, that's okay. We might just give you a new idea or two, but if you've got nothing on the docket, or if you're brand new, I'm hoping that this will be helpful and we can talk through how to best utilize the people that you have that are passionate and excited about this type of work. Does that sound good? Would that be helpful? I'm seeing heads nodding. This is good. All right, well, I'm not going to keep you all just for the sake of keeping you all. Unless anyone has anything further to add, you are going to gain back 36 minutes of your time this morning to go forth and conquer. Feel free to work on your lists. I hope some of you flipped your pages over and used the back. If you have any questions that come up, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Andrew. We will be as helpful as we can be, and hope that you find some value in doing this type of work alongside us. We can't do it alone, and we appreciate all of you so very much. And I hope that our excitement and passion for what we do can bleed into whatever you guys have going on in your work and communities. So thank you very much for your time this morning. And thanks again to Abby and our DOH friends for helping us host and put on this series. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope of good benefit. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.